welcome Eli Gold from the Gold Institute for International Strategies in Washington, D.C. to our little podcast at Politics 365. Obviously, with recent events in Iran, we're all very interested, among many other disturbances and protests and unrest around the world. But we're very interested in Iran. I saw some of the work that your group has done on this issue. You're in Washington, you're in a Washington think tank, just so everyone's aware, and you've done some studying on this issue, and your group of researchers and experts. I really wanted to hear more about what your organization is all about, and then jump into some of your work on Iran.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. The Gold Institute is I've been in policy, and most of the fellows at the Institute have been in policy for a gajillion years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Washington for about 20 years myself. And what we really saw within the think tank world are you have these fantastic organizations with great scholars. Part of the problem that I noticed, and several of my colleagues noticed as well during our policy lifetime, in our previous lifetime in policy,
Mm-hmm.
was that when you have scholars who study issues but have not been on the ground themselves, often what happens is you lose that practical and implementable solutions and solution sets, because either you've been on the ground a generation ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or different administrations, or you've never been on the ground, but you've studied and earned your PhD and so on. And what happens is there creates a disconnect within from the strategy, from the policy to the implementation on the ground.
Right.
So what we did was we created an institute with no scholars. Out of about 30 people, we have 2 people that I would say are scholars. And it's specifically because those 2 areas that they focus on, one is missile defense, mm-hmm. and the other is terrorism. Mm-hmm. There's not much to be on the ground for that.
Yeah, right.
So what we have is our Vice President of Strategic Affairs spent 15 years at the Office of Net Assessment, which is a senior strategy office in the Pentagon. He became the senior strategist for the Trump National Security Council. Mm-hmm. We have members of Congress, Parliament, militaries, generals, and so on, all from around the globe. We have 8 countries represented within the Institute. So that way, when we look at foreign policy and defense of Western ideas and Western civilization, in order to do that properly, you actually have to have the other areas, other parts of the globe represented, because not only is it just a matter of understanding the issues, but what's more important, and especially as we're going to talk about Iran today, what's more important than any of that is understanding the culture. And if you don't understand the culture, you're just an outsider telling someone else what to do. Right. And that is very important. We see that when the Obama administration, their influence in Egypt. We see that with President Biden and his handling of Afghanistan. We see that with the Bush administration post the fall of Saddam. We see that with our interactions with countries like Iran. So unless you understand the culture, it's very, very difficult to implement or put together practical and implementable solutions.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you saying that because obviously, as you know, Iranians are very particular about their culture, and especially even with recent events bringing so many issues to the light of the international community, the Iranian culture would like to separate themselves from the Iranian regime. Right. That's very, very important. Everyone's very passionate about that. That's why there's even argument about the flag and And don't call it Iran, call it the regime. Iranians have been around for 7,000 years as a civilization. And this 43 years will seem like a blink of an eye when it's said and done. So I really appreciate you saying that, especially from all the years I've lived in this country. Sometimes I still feel like a foreigner, honestly. But when I come to Washington, I do see an effort by various folks to reach out, but their effort is superficial. But what you're doing is a very deep, integrated, matrixed approach to policymaking or recommendations that is based in cultural understanding, which is just essential. I really don't know why all the other groups have missed it. They all focus on the missiles and the nuclears and all the tactical, strategic stuff. They completely overlook the culture. And I hardly ever seen, I think, any government report, any CRS report, any think tank report that is culturally centric, because that has a lot to do with success, as you put it, or it has a lot to do with previous failures. So tell me now about your Iran work, because I'm really interested to help our audience understand. There's so much confusion, concern, frustration in Washington, abroad, within the Iranian diaspora. So they're trying to figure out, how can we be helpful? How can we move the needle towards, a peaceful, I'm going to call it a peaceful transition of power. It may not be a peaceful transition. It may be a very violent transition of power, as you're observing. But people are just interested in, what does change look like, and what does your policies and recommendations, how can they inform that conversation?
No, absolutely. So there are many different facets to what we see happening. Personally, for me personally, we have about 30 people within the Institute, and everybody has their areas of focus. Now, from my perspective as an administrator, as the president of the Institute, of course, I have to, I have my hands a little bit of everything. So it makes me, a master, I'm a jack of all trades, a master of none, maybe. But my personally, one of the areas that I focus on directly is Iraq. Now, why do I mention that now? When we go to Washington, we look at Iranian policy, our policy towards Iran. There are, from an institutional perspective, there are many different facets to it. There's one that where we have to pay attention and utilize the force that's within Iran, what we see happening on the streets today. But yet we also have external policies that we have to deal with. For example, President Biden's infatuation with an Iran nuclear deal. This idea that we have to appease the regime, because if we don't appease the regime, then we might lose any chance of this Iran nuclear deal ever coming to fruition. But when we take a look at Iran, and we want regime change. We all want regime change, and maybe from different angles. But what we have to understand is what's Iran's where's their strength coming from? Right. What are they doing to prop up their own regime economically and so on? And in many ways, that comes from outside Iran. Right. There are sanctions in Iran. How do they get around it? And what happens is Iran essentially has annexed Iraq. They have essentially taken control of Iraq. And when I look at Washington D.C.'s policy, which may be different than your policy, you're looking at it culturally. They're looking at it from a foreign policy or militarily. Sure, right? Sure. And what's important to get people to understand is you have to address externally at the same time as we are propping up the people inside, because you can't expect regime change when Iran is making money and selling oil and receiving other revenues through Baghdad or outside Iran. So when we at the Institute look at things at Iran, it has to be multifaceted. So from the Institute's perspective, let me try to bring it back down to earth here.
Sure.
From the Institute's perspective, we're looking at things from culturally. We have a Kurdistan program within the Institute, and that covers primarily Iran and Iraq. So when not long ago in Washington, there was a candlelight vigil that I spoke at. It was commemorating 40 days since the passing of Gina Amini, or Masa Gina Amini, depending on which group of people we're talking to here. So and what was important about that is getting people within the policy world of Washington to understand what it is that's toppling, that will topple this regime. It is not Joe Biden making a statement saying that we stand with the regime, until, of course, the regime tells him that that was too controversial. You can't say that anymore, which is why he hasn't said anything since the beginning of November.
Right.
We have to understand that the toppling of this regime will come from the people, not the leadership.
Right.
That's very important. But additionally, it's also important for lawmakers to understand that yes, sanctions may or may not work depending on your viewpoint on that. I typically am skeptical about sanctions as end all be all. See, but we also have to address how is Iran circumventing those sanctions, which is why I believe the sanctions rarely work, because there's always a way around it. Take a look at what's happening in Russia. And with Russia, we see that there's always somebody, India and so on, China, India, that are willing to circumvent any sanctions that may be put on them. So from the Institute's perspective, we look at it as a multifaceted policy. We have to be able to walk and chew gum and scratch our ear at the same time. And that only if once lawmakers understand that, will we make that change or help facilitate that change.
Right.
In my humble opinion, I believe that a new Congress, even if it's only a House of Representatives, in this specific arena will help in a big way.
Right. No, thank you. That's, I think, very insightful. And I think most people don't recognize that. And certainly in the Iranian diaspora, they understand Iran's reach across the region, but the integrated kind of economies of Iraq and Iran, or the sanctioned economies of Iran, and how it's kind of leveraging Iraq to its favor, that makes sense. And I think it's a nuanced approach, even though Iranians would always think of themselves as separate from any other country on the planet. The way this regime has integrated and matrixed its corrupt economic platform means that you're not going to just be able to, do things in a singular kind of narrow way. You have to have a matrixed approach to it. No, that makes sense, and I'm hopeful that the new, not the new administration, but the new House can come to some terms. I fear that Ukraine and other pressing matters of state will distract this administration for a while, but the people's movement, the revolution that's unfolding as we speak, doesn't have a lifespan of 5 or 10 years or the election cycle of American politics. It has the lifespan that these people, under extreme circumstances, that are striking, they have no money, the economy is in shambles. Just the poorest people in the country are striking and carrying the weight of this revolution, which is just enormous. Truck drivers, unions, teachers, students. So what I'm concerned about, and I'd like to know your opinion, what is even with the new Congress coming in, what is what does the next 12 months look like?
It's really difficult to tell. This is something that there have been protests over the years in Iran.
Right.
However, this is going to be this protest is tied to not to the economy, not to food. This is personal freedoms, personal liberties. We see similar protests happening right now in China. The difference between China and Iran is that while the poorest are hurting and taking the brunt of this shift of this revolution. I'm going to call it a revolution, which is what it is. The Iranian regime, the leadership, doesn't have the luxury that China does. China's wealthy, relatively speaking. Iran is not.
Right.
So to me, what the Iranian diaspora needs to really be able to articulate is, quite frankly, what is it aside from the cultural issues, aside why are we standing up, why are we protesting, is really understanding and being able to articulate to other people how is it that the Iranian regime is still eating.
Right.
If we have all of these sanctions, how is it that Iran still has money to keep some of the lights on?
Right.
And I'm going to go back to Iraq for a moment, because I think that this is hugely important, because that is the lifeblood of this regime at this present moment, in my estimation. And when I talk to people, when I talk to members of Congress or members of Parliament and so on, whereas we try to engage policymakers across the West in particular, what's important to understand is that what Iran is doing in Iraq is no different than what Russia is doing to Ukraine. The only reason why we care more about, there are two reasons why we care more about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, with Russia and Ukraine, than we do in Iran and Iraq, is number one, because this administration wants to keep the hopes of an Iran nuclear deal alive. We've already covered that. But what's important is that Iran has invaded Iraq exactly the same. The difference is that they've done it not diplomatically, but bureaucratically, as opposed to using bombs. Yeah, we do see the occasional missile going back and forth, but it's not bombs, but bureaucratically. So in Ukraine, I turn on the television, there's rubble in the streets. We see this building that fell down.
Right.
So I can appreciate that.
Right.
But the regime has taken control of parliament. They have taken control of the presidency. They have taken control of they've taken control of parliament, which is why they haven't really been able to put together or form any true government. And they've taken control of the Supreme Court, which is hugely important. And the reason why this is important, like I said before, is because this is where they get their money from, to circumvent any sanctions that are levied upon them.
So, I mean, I think right on. First of all, I think the Iranian diaspora and a lot of human rights activists around the world have always been against the Iran deal, but now it is like a hell no type of position, and no one wants to appease this regime. They've had it. And they feel like this Iran deal would give them a lifeline that just so unfair to the Iranian people. So I hope that thing dies a slow death somewhere else, and another opportunity for a regime change is cultivated either in Washington or abroad. But I think you bring up a very good point. Iraq and the bureaucracy, I look at it as a good and bad thing. I think it's the reality. We've always known Iran has had increasing influence in Iraq, but to me, that gives a back door for the regime to escape to, right? I mean, because I've always looked at this, look, where are you going to put all these people? I mean, the regime, and people say, get rid of these people. I go, where are they going to go? There could be 1 million or 2 or more. There's several million Basijis. There's all these rebels. You know, even if you disown them, where are you going to deport? They didn't invade. They're Iranians. We don't like it, but they call themselves Iranians. We don't feel like they share any of our cultural identity the way they have been putting down their own people or importing mercenaries from Iraq or Afghanistan to kill and rape and torture their own people. I feel like they've lost their Iranian identity. They're no longer Iranians. So if they have some connection to Iraq, I say let them go, and then that gives.
I don't know that the Iraqis will like that, but
I'm sure they would. I mean, but one of the conversations that's happening in the community is where they're going to go, because somewhere where there's no extradition. So all their crimes against humanity, all the billions they've stolen and pillaged. Iran is actually a wealthy country, but the way these guys have been running it, and that's why they have no money to. They haven't built a single hospital. The kids are. I mean. It's very much a third world country, the way these deficient public administrators and Iranian bureaucrats have only taken care of themselves and the elite and completely abandoned the great majority of Iranians. And that's what they're really, apart from the Mahsa Amini reaction, they're also rebelling against their economic conditions. No opportunity, no education, no business opportunity unless you're part of the regime. That's really 43 years of that. They just had it. And that trigger, which was a horrible incident, that just caused 43 years of frustration to just erupt. And what's unique about this instance is that it's such an integrated part of Iranian community. Every aspect of Iranian culture is rebelling, which is including some of the regime's own, not critics, but people that are trying to find the regime accountable, from education to economy to jobs. They're having yelling fests at Iranian parliaments between the Kurdistan and Baluch representatives and the Majid. So there are cracks, there are fissions happening within the regime. Will it unfold or unravel in the next 12 months? Your guess is as good as mine. I hope it does. And if they quietly escape to their whatever they have hidden in Iraq, maybe they feel they have a favorable government that won't prosecute them or turn them back over to Iranians. Right. What do you think? I mean, in kind of parting thoughts, where do you see kind of how this coming together?
Well, I think that there's great opportunity here, and what we need to do as policymakers, as well as what I'll call civilians, people who want to get involved, is let's take a look. Let's take a look at what's happened over the past 10 years or so, or even more recently. You take a look at the dynamics within Iran, as you just articulated yourself. This started out within the Kurdistan region, this young Kurdish woman and so on, and it's really grown. But what is so telling is that it has grown so significantly that Iranians themselves is not just a Kurdish issue, but this is going through the entire country, just about the entire country. You have protests. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. This is not, or more. This is not a small band of brothers that happens to be doing this. What's also important to know and really discuss is not only is it the young people that are protesting, it's older people. It is also the members of the IRGC, not many members of the IRGC and the police who are going and putting out videos. They're going on video with their face shown, saying, do not, calling to their own brothers in arms, do not shoot and fire on these people.
Right.
It's important. Now, the reason why I say that we can learn from that, and as we look throughout recent history, is because that's exactly what happened in Egypt.
Right.
In Egypt, the people came to the streets and they overthrew Mubarak. Now, unfortunately, the only organized group of people to take the leadership was the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood, in fact, Mohammed Morsi took control of the government, and he was elected for the role, and he had chosen as to head the military as the field marshal al-Sisi. So Field Marshal al-Sisi, because President al-Sisi, or President Sisi, is now he is very, very, very religious, and Mohammed Morsi assumed that he can count on him. The people, after a short period of time, when people are dying, the food situation is not getting any better, people are being killed, there are bombings and so on, the people came to the street once again, and Mohammed Morsi called up Field Marshal al-Sisi and said, kill the protesters, fire on the protesters. And at that point in time, President Sisi, or Field Marshal Sisi, said no, we are not doing that. These are legitimate protests. I'm not going out and killing our own people. I mean, this is just like Iran has been there for 7,000 years. Egypt has been at the dawn of civilization, and it's always been Egypt. It's never been something else. The same thing in Iran. And what happened? In a short order, there was regime change. Depending if you like presidencies or you don't, whether you call it a coup or not, in my opinion, it was not a coup. There were, the protocols were followed. The Supreme Court justice that took control, it became president as it said in the law, and then there were elections, and President Sisi won because the people liked him, as in he didn't kill him, so they saw a true leader. If they can do that, in Egypt, the Iranian people themselves can do that in Iran. We have to provide the necessary support to the people. It's not. This isn't a situation where we have to create regime change.
Right.
We're not creating. The U.S. isn't creating regime change. If we do, it's going to be a disaster. Take a look at all the other countries.
And nobody wants that. You're right. Nobody wants that. Right.
But we have to say, look, it's been done before.
Right.
It can be done again.
Right.
Just give us the support that we need. And if you're not willing to give us the support, don't stand in our way.
Right.
And with that, we'll see regime change within a matter of 6 months.
I hope so. The one thing, of course, we've all looked at those instances, and whether you call it a bloodless coup or a military coup or just a proper transition of power, that moment that you described with Sisi, even though Sisi has his many, many critics, for whatever reason, that to me shows a moment of integrity and honor.
Correct.
We hope that the Revolutionary Guard can find those qualities, but nobody in Iran really trusts that group to find that moment of honor and integrity to say, you know what, my job is to protect the people, not a cult leader. And that's really what the difference is between Iran and some of the other, countries and examples of coup d'etats that have happened. So far, as much as there are cracks under pressure and, like, as you said, videos and things emerging, leaking from the guards, no one has seen a quality, an honorable person to say, you know what, I'm with the people. And that's really the toughest mountain to climb. I know it seems insurmountable. It may come from the lower ranks or middle management. It may not come from the top, because the top has millions invested, and they know they may not come out of this in one piece, no matter what they do. So they're fighting for their life right now by just oppressing people even more. So whether it's from the bottom up, kind of within the ranks, and slowly departure and unraveling, I think that may be, I don't know, that may be more likely than an honorable moment at the top, because nobody has seen such a quality yet.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on that. I would, even if there was somebody that appeared from within the regime, meaning, et al. At large, with
Right.
the, whether it's the IRGC or anywhere else, I would be skeptical about that.
Right.
I would be, I mean, unless he came out, unless it was a real Jesus moment where he came out, and it was clear as day that
Right.
he's walking on water. It's not. I wouldn't trust anyone there.
Right.
All I meant was that this is that just like there, it came. You saw some leadership. You saw
Right.
someone actually stand up and say,
Right.
I will not do that. It must again come from the people, which it appears as though it will. Whether and whether it's someone who's currently in Iran or not, it's that individual will show him or herself.
Right.
How great would it be if it was a her under the transition from this regime to a? But I think that there's great opportunity. I think that we haven't seen a revolution like this in Iran in ever.
Right. Ever.
And I think that this is going to be the opportunity. Now, the question I will pose to U.S. leadership is: are we willing to stand and make our name, or our legacy, leave our legacy as the guy or people who stood with the regime,
Right.
or stood with the women of Iran,
Right.
and at large the people of Iran? Is that going to be our name? Are we stand here in the United States for women's rights, and that's our thing, women's rights, the glass ceilings and so on? Are we willing to stand for the Masa Aminis of Iran, or the regime? That's a question that we pose to the people. To the leadership.
Excellent closing argument, Eli Gold from the Gold Institute for International Strategies in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for your time, for your insights. Let's keep talking, because Iran's not going to go away. And I don't think this revolution is going to go away. I pray and hope that the people of Iran will find their peace and their joy that they so well deserve. And that, as you put it, the administration will stand with the people of Iran once and for all and forever, because that's really who we are as Americans on this side of the fence. Those are the qualities that we embrace. We should embrace the same qualities in the Iranian people.
Thank you for having me. It was a
pleasure. Thanks so much. Thanks, Eli.